everybody. Welcome to the League of Women Voters, La Crosse area's first Lunch and Learn, or as somebody said to me, the No Lunch and Learn. I'm Mary Nugent, this year's League's president. Today's topic of changes in voting laws and processes is very relevant. And we're so pleased that Ginny Dankmeyer, La Crosse County Clerk, is able to be here with us today to address what sometimes seems to be a moving target. In addition, Franz will give us an update on the current legislation. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website and YouTube channel. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties of any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. I'd now like to introduce you to Robin Schmidt, our Vice President, for some how-to explanations.
Thanks, Mary. I'm going to go ahead and change the spotlight here. So thanks, everyone. For today's webinar, I'm going to be assisting with the question and answers for the speakers. To ask a question at any time, use the Q&A icon that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type in your question. You'll also be able to see questions that other people have asked, and note that all questions will be listed as anonymous. If someone's already typed a question that you were going to ask, you can upvote that question by clicking on the thumbs up, and that moves it up to the top of the list, and it shows me that there's other people also interested in that question, so it's really helpful. When Ellen's done with her presentation, I'll ask questions that have been submitted that are for her. And then when Ginny's speaking, if there are questions that come in on a specific topic, I will try to ask them while she's discussing that topic. And then we'll also ask them at the end of her presentation. Questions that were sent to us already by League of Women Voter members prior to today were given to the speakers, so to be addressed in their program. And other than that, I just want to say thank you for joining our program. And I'm going to unspotlight me, and I will spotlight Mary and let her continue on with the introductions. So thank you all.
This year has certainly been a learning curve for everybody in the League. Doing things virtually has created challenges, and it's heartwarming to see how our League has stepped up to meet those challenges. For example, when we asked for volunteers to help with mail-in balloting, with the preparation and with the sorting, over 13 people who are League members said yes. I was there last Thursday, and every volunteer there was a League member. Clerks everywhere can use help. If you have some time, call your city, county, or township clerks and volunteer. It's really quite fun. The city of La Crosse is also looking for poll workers. So go online to the City of La Crosse's website to government, then click elections to find what positions are available. They need everybody from people helping to social distance to registering voters. Click on the position that you want and then fill out the form. And then where it says other, put down that you're a League member. Also, next Tuesday, the 22nd, our League, in coordination with United Way, Leader Ethics, and other community partners, are offering a virtual town hall meeting as part of the Vote Safe project. Panelists will discuss how to vote safely and cut through the misinformation that's flooding the media. There's more information on this on our website, but this is an event you don't have to register for because it's going to be a town hall live. But you look at our website for how to do that. Finally, if you'd like to get out the vote and get some exercise doing it, grab a partner and come to our door hanger event on Saturday at the United Unitarian parking lot. You would get a street assignment and distribute door hangers that have voting information on them. It's supposed to be a really nice day, so it'd be a good day to get out, have a walk, and do something for your community. So now, to keep us up to date on legislation and what the state league has been up to, Ellen Franz.
Okay, so hot off the presses. Many of you have been aware that the Wisconsin Supreme Court put a hold on the absentee ballots late last week because there was a challenge. Challenge came from the Green Party presidential, vice presidential candidates. Howie Hawkins was the presidential candidate. And thankfully, for clerks and those getting absentee ballots, the court issued an opinion yesterday. I've looked at it quickly, and basically it concluded that the petitioners had delayed in seeking relief. There was about a 2-week period where they waited before they filed their challenge. And they, under the circumstances, the opinion says, including the fact that the 2020 fall general election has essentially begun, it is too late to grant petitioners any form of relief that would be feasible and that would not create confusion and undue damage to both the Wisconsin electors who want to vote and the other candidates in all of the various races on the general election ballot. So they vacated the order from last week and ordered that the petition for leave to bring an action by Howie Hawkins and his motion for temporary injunctive relief were denied. So no changes in the ballot forms. Clerks will be able to again start and finish the preparation to send out the absentee ballots. That's good news. By the way, in the opinion cited, one of the things that the court wanted to know was how many people had asked for absentee ballots. And this may not be a completely accurate account, but the opinion notes that 968,000 absentee ballots were requested. And of course, that number may well be increasing. Okay, the next case is what we have commonly called the purge case. This is the one that was generated by a conservative group that in 2019 asked the court to require the WEC to follow its rules. The controversy is between the rule, apparently, which says that they have to send out, when you show up on the purge list, they think you've moved, and you have to respond within 30 days to indicate you have not moved and thereby lost your registration in a sense. So, and the policy of the WEC, which was to hold those folks on the purge list for a couple of years before they actually cut them off. So that decision is set for oral argument in the Wisconsin Supreme Court on September 29th. Apparently about at this point, it impacts 129,000. That was the number in May. I know that there have been league groups and others contacting people on the purge list to make sure that if they did move, that they get registered. So the number that it impacts may not be as great as once thought. Nonetheless, you know, if it impacts even one voter, that's not a good result. So whether or not the Supreme Court issues a decision by election day, who knows? But as I said, it's oral argument on September 29th. The final case I'm going to mention has again been in the courts for a while. This is Gear versus Knutson, and it's venued in the Federal District Court for the Western District of Wisconsin. That's Madison. It's Judge Conley who has this case. It was filed before the April election, in the days when everybody was wondering, what the heck are we going to do during this pandemic? Are we going to make people actually have to go out and get witnesses if they're sheltering at home, and make it easier to vote absentee? So you may remember how everything was changing in those days before the April election. The Democratic Party brought this action to get an injunction to make it easier to vote by mail. There was telephone argument, and Judge Conley did extend the deadline for online voter registration before that April election, but he put off ruling on the request to extend the deadline for receipt of absentee ballots. The argument asked, or the petitioner asked, that they be allowed to be received after the election date. That's the decision he put off at that time. As you may know, in Wisconsin, the ballots have to be received on election day. It can't be postmarked, it has to be received on that day. So there were some other modifications Judge Conley made, but the case then was heard by our Wisconsin Supreme Court. An over dissent of 4 justices stayed his ruling considering the ballots and when they would be received. There have been other filings since that time and other arguments. So, and what I could find, I could not quickly find a decision this morning, but oral arguments were heard again by our court, by Conley, I think, if I'm thinking right, on August 5th, but there was no decision at this point in time. On a side note, I also found, as I was looking, that there's a case called Jefferson versus Dane County. And in Dane County, the county interpreted the state election law to allow Dane County voters to vote absentee with not a requirement of the voter ID. And that case is also before the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That case is also scheduled to be heard on September 29th. It was a local decision by Dane County, so it doesn't immediately affect anybody else, but that's another election-based case that is scheduled on September 29th. So we may or may not be out of these controversies. As Ginny mentioned just a little bit earlier as we were setting up, we don't know for sure that the purge case is not going to be appealed, and a request for a stay. Anything is possible. The rules around elections, not just in Wisconsin, but in many places, are being challenged in many ways across the nation. And these are just the ones that are, impacting us in Wisconsin. So you just have to be alert, and let's all hope that there is no decision that, I will use a term, messes things up, because I think sometimes, even if something doesn't pan out, like right now, the decision on the ballots by the third-party presidential candidates didn't work to change anything up. But just the filing of it and just something in the news, I think has a great impact on folks who worry about if they vote, how should they vote? Is their vote going to be really counted? Is something going to happen? So confusion, I suspect, is part of the game here too, for folks who want to challenge some of these rules. So we are where we are, and I guess we will see what happens. Hopefully nothing will change anything up.
Thanks, Ellen. Say we don't have any questions at this time, so as you do your introduction to Ginny, I will put her on the spotlight.
Okay, so my introduction is actually not very long. Ginny has worked with our local league before, certainly. She has been the Crosse County clerk since her appointment in February of 2011. Her first 2 years, she said, was had 13 elections in a statewide recount. She sees that as a baptism by fire, and she thought she had seen everything that could come and that nothing would top it. But of course, each election cycle, something seems to top it as we've gone forward. Nonetheless, there are 18 municipal clerks in La Crosse County. Ginny trains many poll workers throughout the county and has done security training across the state for various counties. Many of us will recall that the issue a couple years ago was our system's hackable, how secure is the vote? That argument, I think, now has shifted a little bit to the Postal Service rather than the actual mechanisms or the programming that our voting machines use. But so she has done that throughout the counties. And although Ginny says there is chaos, she honestly says that she really does love her job and the people she works with. I see a quick question up. I think I'm just going to answer that if I may. So a question, oh, I just lost it. Let me see, I can bring it up. I'm not able to bring it up. The question was, what about the status of printing ballots? I can tell you from working at the clerk's office for La Crosse that the ballots, many of them are printed and ready to go because deadlines happen pretty quickly in terms of when they are to start getting out to folks later this week. The 17th and then the 19th for military personnel. So I would bet that many, certainly large municipalities have already printed their ballots, which was another issue related to any changes on those ballots. Ginny may know more than.
I also have one question that came in, but I think maybe Ginny can answer that as she does her presentation. And the question is, if you ask for and receive an absentee ballot but decide to vote in person, what should you do?
Yeah, we can touch on that topic when I do my presentation.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Ellen. And it's really great to be here. I wish I was there in person. I enjoy speaking on election topics. I'm probably one of the very few people that says I love elections, and the more chaos you throw at me, I think the more I love my job. Yeah, ballots, as Ellen said, ballots were printed. We waited until the absolute last day that we could actually get them to the printer. As you know, there's only certain qualified printers in the state that can print ballots. Therefore, a lot of counties are printed with the same printer. So it's not as simple as just, okay, print my ballots and let's get them in house here. They have to organize print in multiple counties. So we waited till last Friday. It was about noon when I finally told the printer to go ahead. He had his people work the weekend and we got the ballots in house. It was like Tuesday afternoon. So we were prepared to meet the deadline if need be, or we were prepared to hold on to them and reprint if that even happened. The biggest thing was making sure we got to the UACAVA voters. That's really what the September 17th deadline is and the September 19th deadline. It's to make sure our military and overseas voters get their ballots so they have more than enough time to get them back. And either way, La Crosse County was going to be prepared to meet those deadlines, even if it was sending out a PDF ballot. And in most cases, when you do that, you're sending out a PDF ballot anyways, and it has to be remade. We were thinking remaking 100 PDF ballots throughout the La Crosse County would definitely be a lot better than remaking, I think it was about 18,000 absentee ballots that are going to be going out in the next few days here. That's how many requests we've had so far. So yeah, the ballots are in. Now they're with the municipal clerks. They've been given the go-ahead to start processing them, labeling them, putting postage on them. And I think over the next couple of days, they'll be getting them to the post office. We're hoping there's not going to be a problem with the post office, you know, with all of a sudden getting 18,000 ballots handed over to them to be delivered. But if you look at this statewide, in the next couple of days, they're going to be getting close to 1 million ballots that's going to have to be delivered. So I guess we can compare it to Christmas time when they get the influx of cards and packages, and I have faith that they'll get those envelopes and absentee ballots delivered. The other thing Ellen didn't mention was the Kanye West lawsuit. And even though Kanye West lost his bid to get on the ballot, we were alerted that he intends to file an appeal. We were alerted that over the weekend, and his appeal would be with the Supreme Court. Obviously, he hasn't filed that as of a couple minutes ago when I checked. So whether he still proceeds to do that, yes or no, I don't know. But if you look at the grounds and how the Green Party case was denied, we can only assume that if he does actually file appeal, that's likely will be denied as well under the same circumstances. So we're proceeding with caution because there is that West lawsuit technically still out there. But it is 2020. We don't want to say take anything for granted. That's our motto right now. It's 2020, so don't expect anything. So yeah, the biggest thing talking right now is absentee voting. Expectation for absentee voting is going to be extremely high. We've seen this already. Close to 1 million absentee ballots requested for this November election, and we're still a month and a half out. LaCrosse County itself has, I think it's close to 18,000 requests are in, and a lot of municipal clerks say they're continuing to get more absentee requests, as the days go on. So some of this, people saying, like on September 1st, the Elections Commission sent out that huge 2.6 million piece mailing, and are a lot of these requests coming in from that? I think some are. The state themselves says they only really expected like a 1% to 5% response from that mailing. I think personally, the mailing probably caused more confusion than it was helpful, simply because the mailing had to be printed in June because it's 2.6 million pieces. And by the time it got mailed out on September 1st, some people already had gone in and requested absentee ballots for the August election. So then we started getting phone calls. We knew the day the mailing hit the mailboxes because our phones rang off the hook. People wondering, is it about registering to vote? And I've already requested an absentee ballot. Why am I getting this? So we spent a lot of time looking up, yes, we're confirming you're registered. Yes, we're confirming you have a request on file. To further that confusion, the Republican Party also sent out a mailing, ironically at the same time, about requesting an absentee ballot in their little forms. The little forms cause a lot of confusion, and it doesn't matter what party or political group sends them out. They don't provide all the information necessary. A lot of them don't say you have to provide a photo ID. A lot of them don't get us emails or phone numbers. So when that's sent back into our offices and the person's not registered or they don't have a photo ID, these clerks are spending time to be doing something else, trying to follow up with these and getting the information necessary. So these mailings are going to be considered problematic, but they're going to continue until the November election is over. And it's just something the clerks are going to deal with. We've dealt with them all along, and we'll continue to deal with them. But they definitely miss information that is required. And so the clerks are spending a lot of time trying to follow up on that.
Hey, Ginny.
Yes.
Here's a question. I've gotten several mailings from the Center for Voter Information in Madison, which contains a voter registration form. Is that legitimate, do you know?
The only one I know is legitimate is the one that came from the Elections Commission. And it was in a regular envelope, and on the top of it, it said important voter information, and it actually said it was from the Wisconsin Elections Commission. That is that huge 2.6 million piece mailing. And that mailing went out to anybody who was registered currently, but did not have an absentee ballot request on file. So I know there's a lot of other groups out there. If I don't see them, I can't say for sure. I can only say if it came from the Elections Commission, that's going to be the only legit request that's going out right now. There is a big push to get people to register and request their absentee ballot on myvote.wi.gov. When people do this online, the information is automatically dumped into the voter registration system, and it's a lot less data entry work on the clerk's part. They still review all the information, they approve it, they reject it. If something's missing, they can go back to the voter and get what's necessary. So the push right now is absentee voting and also using the MyVote website. A key thing when you request your absentee ballot using the MyVote website, you can actually track your ballot. You can see when it was mailed. There's barcodes on them that the post office is now tracking them. You can see when the clerk received it back. So there's a lot of ways you can track your absentee ballot now. If you've made a request and a couple weeks have gone by, or even a week, and you haven't received it, you can contact your clerk to say, I requested this, what's missing? So there's a good way that we can now track these absentee ballots and make sure that they're getting out. There are concerns with the delivery and the return of absentee ballots. You know, it's 1 million pieces at the post office in addition to the regular mail that they're going to have to deliver. I believe that they're going to be delivered on time. Obviously, as with all mail, some may get misdelivered or lost in the mail. But again, if you're following the My Vote website, you can track to see if your ballot's been mailed out and follow up with your clerk, to get that. Some of the concerns are, absentee ballots are being mailed to everybody, and that's not the case. This big mailing was absentee ballot request forms. It wasn't ballots that were mailed out. And I think people are getting really confused with that. Along with that, ballots are only mailed to people who request them. We're not going to automatically mail ballots to people because they're registered. So you have to request it. Once you request it, we're going to confirm, are you registered to vote? Are you a current active registered voter? And then we're going to see if you have a proper photo ID on file. If those things all meet up, then the clerk will process your absentee ballot request and send you an absentee ballot in the mail. So, for the people who think that we're just randomly mailing all these absentee ballots out, that's not the case. In some states, they do mail ballots to every single citizen, but not here in Wisconsin. So I think when people vote absentee, they can be assured that it's a pretty safe process here and that there's not going to be fraud. You do have the people who will try to vote twice. They'll have a vacation home up north and they think they can vote absentee up north, and then they come and they vote at the polls. Our system is in place that will stop that and flag it. And then this has happened in the past where then they're charged with a felony. So, people can be concerned about people trying to vote twice, but be assured that there's systems in place that most people are unaware of that will prevent people from voting twice. Return of absentee ballots is also a concern we're getting lots of calls on. People necessarily don't trust the post office anymore. And what we're telling people, if you don't trust that the post office will return your absentee ballot, we have other options for you. One of them is most municipalities, and I'm going to say just about all of them in Crosse County, have a drop box outside their city, village, or town hall. You can take the ballot there and put it in that drop box. Then it's delivered in person. The clerks check them on a daily basis. They're secure. Another option is when your clerk has regular business hours, you can take it back to the clerk's office, deliver it to them in person, hand it to them. And then the other option is, of course, to return it to the polls by 8 p.m. on election day.
Hey, Ginny?
Yes.
There's a question submitted. Do you know if the drop boxes that were in place in August are the same number and locations as are going to be used now? They asked about the county. I don't think the county has drop boxes. It's the actual municipalities. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, correct. The drop boxes are going to be at each of the municipal town hall, the city halls, the village halls. The county themselves are not putting drop boxes around the county because it's a security issue. Someone has to be watching them. They have to be checked every day. So the drop boxes are at your municipal clerk's office. The La Crosse County admin building does have a drop box. If an absentee ballot happens to get in there, we're going to make sure it gets where it needs to go. But you should be delivering them back to your municipal clerk in the municipality where you live in. That's the proper procedure for returning your absentee ballot. So there's different ways you can return your absentee ballot. And again, tracking this with the barcodes now and then using My Vote is definitely a better option and can help people to secure that their ballot's being mailed out and it's being returned on time. Like I said, again, we're not mailing ballots to every citizen. It's only to registered voters who have the proper request on file and the proper photo ID. So, we don't need to worry about that. We talked about the drop boxes around the county. We're not going to be doing that. If down the road we feel there's a need for it, we'll come up with a plan. But from past elections, there just hasn't been a need to put the drop boxes around. I know there was talk about maybe using the libraries, but then there's the concern about security. So we're going to keep the drop boxes only at the municipal clerk's office right now. And if something changes, obviously we'll adapt. That's the story of our lives. Things always change. Something always happens that we adjust to it. So some law changes that had happened. One of the law changes that happened was that One Wisconsin Institute law that was sitting out there for years and years. They finally came down with that decision. I believe it was right before the August election to confuse everything. So one of the things it says is now in-person absentee voting used to be whatever the clerks decided their hours would be. And most clerks in LaCrosse County all agreed we're going to do 3 weeks so it's uniform across the county to make it easier for the voters. This lawsuit that finally the decision came down now prevents in-person absentee voting except for the 14 days before the election. So the first Tuesday, I believe it's Tuesday, October 20th, is the first day that in-person absentee voting can happen. And then it says that can go up until the Sunday before the election. Most clerks stop in-person absentee voting at 5 p.m. on the Friday before the election, simply because that's also the state statute for the end of registering to vote in the clerk's office. So they also ended at the same time in case someone comes in who's not registered, they would be prevented from voting. So it also gives the clerk the weekend to organize and sort all the absentee envelopes, get them pre-numbered, alphabetized on the poll book, and then ready for the election on Tuesday, which helps them process them faster and then results in getting results a little bit faster on election night. There are several polling places in LaCrosse County who have gone out and purchased second DS200s. The DS200 is the optical scan voting machine that you see at the polls where you insert your ballot. It gives you a little bleep beep to let you know it got counted. Clerks have purchased second of them. They use some of the CARES grant or the Routes to Recovery Fund money that was received to us to purchase the second one. And on election day, that second machine is going to be solely used for processing absentee ballots. There'll be a whole second set of poll workers, and that's what they're going to be doing all day until they can get those absentee ballots processed. In past elections, what was done is a lot of times you try to feed 3 or 4 of these absentee ballots in between voters. And what really happened is at 8 o'clock when the polls closed, that's when you had to process the absentees. So having these second machines in some of the bigger municipalities will allow the absentee ballots to be processed quicker throughout the day. And then we're not sitting here till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning waiting for results. We expect there to be probably some close races. So we hope these just get our results in a little bit quicker. The other major law change that happened with the One Wisconsin lawsuit was the voter registration. Prior to this, it was 10 days to establish residency. That has now changed to 28 days. So we're updating a lot of our forms to conform with that 28 days. And that's something that poll workers now have to deal with. You know, if you haven't lived there for 28 days, then you're required to go back to a previous address where you have lived for that 28 days and vote that for this upcoming election. So that'll be a little bit different. I think it was easier for people to establish a 10-day residency versus the 28 days. So they will have to start to adjust to that. You know, those are probably the 2 main law changes that came out of that case. In-person absentee voting locations. I know in some of the bigger cities, they add additional locations for in-person absentee voting. As far as we go here in LaCrosse County, municipal clerks are just going to keep it at the city, village, and town hall during their hours. The clerks post a type E notice that's coming up here in a couple weeks that will say the dates they're going to have in-person absentee voting and that the hours they're going to be available. You can go vote in-person absentee during those times. Again, they're limited to just those 14 days because of that lawsuit. We will post all the type E notices on the county, the election portions of the county website, so voters can go to one general location to look at those hours and see what they have available for their clerks. I know a lot of the smaller municipalities always say or by appointment, and that's to benefit the citizens. A lot of these smaller communities are farmers. A lot of them don't get in late from the fields. So a lot of those clerks will help out people who need to vote, or if there's a sudden going out of town for work or something, you know, that by appointment allows them to be a little bit flexible on when they can have voters come in and vote. I know there's been a lot of concern about people attempting to vote twice. They may or may not have been a comment from our president about vote absentee and then go to the polls and see if you can vote again. That's caused a lot of uproar, a lot of confusion, a lot of people now questioning absentee voting. You know, I can't speak for other states. I can speak for Wisconsin. And Wisconsin has the WIS vote. It's the Wisconsin statewide voter registration system. It's a very robust system. It's a very secure system. It's a very in-depth system. So, you know, for someone like I mentioned earlier, someone who has a cabin up north and then live down here where they think they're going to vote absentee up there and then in person down here, you know, the system flags if you voted absentee and then you're trying to vote in person, the system flags that, hey, you already have an absentee ballot on file. You know, and those cases have been turned over to the DA where charges were filed. One of the other things that happens is once you request an absentee ballot, the poll book is flagged with a watermark that says absentee next to your name. So if you did vote absentee and now you're going to go to the polls to see if you can really vote twice, the poll workers are going to ask you, did you return your absentee ballot? If the ballot has been returned by the municipal clerk, there's going to be a red voter number in the poll book next to your name, and they're going to ask you. And if you say no, well, now we're going to go check the absentee log. If we can confirm it, we're now going to go grab that absentee envelope and say, is this your signature? If they want to challenge if that's their signature or not, we're then going to go back and get their voter registration form and say, this is your voter registration form. Here's your signature. Does it match your signature on your absentee envelope? And if it is, well, now we're going to turn you over to the DA for possibly trying to vote twice. So we have processes in place that hopefully will deter people from trying to do that. We're aware that we're going to have people who are going to try it. So we'll be doing training, hopefully, before the election, and we're going to work with clerks and poll workers on what to do if they have someone come in that they feel is trying to vote twice.
Hey, Jenny.
Yes.
Can you clarify that if you mailed an absentee ballot and after you checked the My Vote, you see that it hadn't been received, can you go in person to vote? Like what happens if you mail it in, but it doesn't get there by the day of election? Can you go on that day and see if it got in, or what would you advise people?
So if you requested an absentee ballot and it got mailed to you and you returned it, you technically are considered that you are done voting. So the poll book will have a absentee watermark next to your name because you were sent an absentee ballot. The poll workers will ask you, did you return your ballot? And that's, did you put it in a drop box? Did you give it to the clerk? Did you drop it in the mail? If you say yes to any of those, then you are done voting, unfortunately. And that kind of means if you put it in the drop box on Friday or a Monday before the election, chances are it's not going to get back in time to be counted. So that's just, if you're, I guess our guidance is if you're within a week of an election, don't be putting it in the mail. Deliver it to your municipal clerk's office, put it in the drop boxes, bring it back on election day. Because if you put it in the mail, they say you should be giving yourself at least a week to get that back. So if you do request it and you do somehow return it in any of those methods there, then you will be done voting. You won't be allowed to vote at the polls. If, on the other hand, you requested one and you just didn't mail it back and the election day comes, and you go to the polls and they say, did you mail it back? And your response is, nope, it's still sitting on my cupboard at home. I just didn't get around to voting it. Then you'll be allowed to vote at the polls. But if it got mailed back or returned in any way or form, you know, then you're done voting.
And then just to clarify though, because I'm not sure if I misheard you, if you put it in a drop box, even on the day of election, the clerks will get it, correct? It's just the mailbox that you can't guarantee they'll get it.
Correct. The clerks know that they're going to be checking those drop boxes, and for a lot of them, the drop boxes are right there at the same polling place where the town hall is. So at 8 o'clock, they'll go to those drop boxes. They'll check them to make sure whatever's in there is pulled out and processed on election day. Yeah, not to be confused, if you put it in an actual mailbox and mailed it back, that's going to be considered returned, even though the clerk doesn't technically have it in her hands. Okay. Let me see where I am here with my notes. The other thing
Hey,
is,
Ginny,
yes,
can you confirm, sorry, another question just came in. Can people bring their absentee ballot to the polling place, and can it be any polling place?
They can bring it to the polling place. It has to be the polling place that they vote at. So in most places, that's going to be the same municipality. The only problem where that's a hiccup is in the city of LaCrosse and city of Onalaska. If you return that ballot to District 1 in the city of LaCrosse, but you technically vote at District 10, that ballot will not be counted. Nor is it the responsibility of the clerk to try to get it to the correct polling place. So you want to make sure you return it to the polling place on election day where you would normally go and vote. Okay, and that's something with absentee voting. When you decide to vote absentee, there's some general rights that are given up. And one of those, if you return your absentee ballot to the wrong polling place, your vote may not be counted because the clerk is not required to try to get it to the correct polling place. In LaCrosse County, I know every clerk will do the best to get it to that correct polling place. But if it's returned at 7:30 at night, there's a very low chance that that's going to get to the right polling place. So that's something you need to be very careful with if you're in the city of La Crosse or Onalaska and you're returning your ballot to the polls. Another thing to keep in mind for the people who think they want to try to vote twice, every year after the general election, the state of Wisconsin actually compares voter rolls to other states. So if you have college kids that are here that live in another state and they're like, oh, well, I'll just vote absentee from back home and then in person here. We have caught people in that before because we share voter rolls with other states. It's part of a federal program where they compare the voter rolls. And if we can show that you are the same person who not only signed the poll book here in Wisconsin and also an absentee certificate in another state, again, that will be turned over for possible charges to the DA. So you have to keep that in mind that, there's processes in place that most people don't realize. For the most part, it's the municipal clerks that realize how robust and in-depth that voting program is to be able to catch people who vote absentee and voting twice at the polls. The other things to keep in mind is the poll books are printed usually the day before the election. It's after absentee voting is done. So any absentee ballots that have been returned are going to have that watermark on the poll book. So we're going to know who voted absentee. The clerks usually spend the weekend before the election pre-numbering all these absentee ballots, again, to help the process go quicker on election day. So there's going to be a red number next to your name, which is going to confirm to the poll workers that you voted absentee. And we have it back in the clerk's office because we have a red number on it, which means you were issued a voter number when the clerks were processing them. So again, and that's going to go if someone tries to challenge that, like I said, then we're going to pull out the actual absentee ballot certificate. We're going to see, is this you? Is this your signature? And again, follow up more if we need to with voter registration forms and comparing signatures to prove that that is the person and that, something fraudulently wasn't done. The other thing with absentee ballots, all these absentee ballots being mailed to people who are already dead, again, the WIS vote system gets compared with not only Social Security, but also with the DOT, the DMV. So when someone passes away and it's updated in the Social Security Administration, we also get alerts to that with the Wisconsin voter registration system. And what clerks do, usually on a weekly basis, we get alerts that you have some death matches, is what they're called, or felon matches in the system. And they said, here's a person who passed away, got alerted to the Social Security system, and this seems comparable to a voter on the rolls. And the clerk will go in, do the names match, do the birth dates match, driver's license, or last for their social. And if indeed that is the same person, that person will be marked as deceased and will not even print on the poll book. Now, in some cases, someone will have received an absentee ballot, had voted it, and mailed it back, and then passed away before the election happens. This happens a few times with every election. I know it happened at least twice with the August election. And a lot of that's because, there's almost 2 months between absentee voting and the actual election. That gets flagged when the poll books are printed and those absentee ballots are pulled out, put on the side, and they're marked as to be rejected, because an absentee ballot is to be rejected if the voter passes away before election day. So there's that process in place. And again, it's a similar process with felons. If someone's a felon, you know, and they're showed up in the poll book or they're trying to register to vote, it'll get flagged and the clerk will look into it more, and then that person will be prevented from registering to vote, and their name will not be printed on the poll book. So if they do show up at the polls on election day trying to register to vote knowing that they're a felon, we do have a felon list at every polling place required by law. So when someone's registering to vote, the clerk will compare their registration form with the felon list and see if that person's on it. If they're on it, they will be prevented from registering to vote. So there were some of the other rumors out there that, you know, gets frustrating for us, because if someone fully understood how the system works, they would know that there's processes in place to prevent that. And obviously, we're not mailing ballots out to people who are dead. How are the polls safe for voting? I want to say, at least here in Crosse County, with the pandemic in April and the pandemic still here in August, that no additional COVID-19 cases were contributed to the elections. And I have to give a big kudos and shout out to the clerks, the poll workers. They did an amazing job doing everything they could to keep not only themselves safe, but the voters safe. A lot of them got really creative. There's the Municipal Clerks Network where they all compare ideas. Someone came up with the idea for that plexiglass shield. It was a super simple, cheap way of doing it. They shared it with everyone. Before we know it, we had these plexiglass shields in most of the polling places. Clerks talked to each other, came up with ideas on how to separate them. I know in April and August, we had the wash stations. We conjoined with a local porta potty company. They ordered in wash stations. So we had wash stations delivered to every polling place where voters could wash their hands before entering them. You know, we also procured cleaning supplies. There was the hand sanitizers, you know, face shields. I mean, a lot of the stuff was easier to get for the August election than it was in April, because in April, nothing was available, and we had to dig deep in our resources to try to provide that stuff for the clerks in April. In August, a lot of it was provided from the state. And again, we had the same shipment come in from the state to be used for the November election. So that includes surface sanitizer. It includes hand sanitizing gel. There was some paper towels. You know, LaCrosse County had, I think it was 40-some thousand pens printed up, so every voter would have their own pen, so we wouldn't be cross-contaminating that way. There was face masks, there was gloves, any of the numerous things we did to keep these polls safe. And in April, we did have the National Guard come in. A lot of them were extremely helpful. We're very blessed to have the National Guard in our state. They were all professional, they did a great job. And I know a lot of the polling places now have additional poll workers whose only job is to walk around and just spray and wipe down the surfaces. A lot of them, right after every voter in the voting booth, they'll go in and wipe down the surface, constantly wiping down the different surfaces that are touched by voters to, again, help make sure that we keep it as safe as possible. We want voters to vote. If you don't want to vote absentee for whatever reason, we want you to feel safe going to the polls to vote. And like I said, in April and August, there's been no cases contributed to voting, so we're pretty proud of that. And we're going to continue to carry on everything we did in April and August into the November elections, and again, you know, to be as safe as possible.
Jenny, another question that's
yes.
related to safety but not COVID safety. Do you have any concerns about intimidation at the polls? One of the persons asked that rumors are abounding about militias being asked to be at polling places to keep it legitimate. Are you hearing anything about that, or is there any concern that you have about that?
I have not heard anything about that. I don't have concerns about that. You know, observers are allowed to be at the polling place. Observers have to follow certain rules, and when an observer comes to the polling places, they have to sign in, they have to show proper photo ID, and when they sign in, they're basically attesting that they're going to follow all the rules required of observers. And if at any point they're not following their rules, the chief inspectors can ask them to leave the polling place. So, if anybody comes there and they're intimidating or doing anything they're not supposed to, clearly they're going to be asked to leave the polling places. We've had situations in the past where we've asked observers to leave, but for the most part, most observers are there. They have a job at hand. They're being very respectful. And we're very appreciative of that because the clerks and chief inspectors have so much else to be worried about on election day. But I haven't heard that. I guess I don't have a lot of concern for it just because of the processes that are in place. If someone does come into the polls and is an observer and they're being intimidating, they would be asked to leave because it's not allowed as an observer in the polling place.
Okay. And then one question about felons that had come in, and I didn't have a chance to ask it before. Once a person has served their prison time and they're off paper, can they then vote? Does the person have to have paid all fines to be able to vote?
I do not know about the fines. I just know as long as the person has served their time and have been released of their sentence. I don't know if being released of their sentence means they have to have their fines paid. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if Ellen can give any insight on that. It simply says that they've been released of their sentence, and I don't know if that includes paying their fines or not. Ellen?
I don't know. I think the question probably comes from Florida because what Florida had, they had a rule that felons could never vote. And then they backed it up by, I think, referendum and changed it that felons can vote. But then powers that be in Florida said, well, you're not really, if you don't pay your fees, we're going to say you have to do that before you can vote. So that came from Florida. I don't know what it is here, Jenny, in terms of whether there's been any, you have to pay fees or whether you have to just have to be off parole, off probation. That's what paper means, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I've never been asked that, and I don't know the question or the answer for that either. So,
Jenny, can you answer a couple other questions that have come in?
yes, absolutely. Okay. I'll take all the questions we can have.
All right, so considering the uptick in COVID cases at UWL, do you know if that's still going to be a polling place?
It is still going to be a polling place. I have that on my sheet here to talk about. The only polling place change that's happened has been in the city of LaCrosse, where they changed District 12. Yes, I'm looking over my shoulder to look at the list of districts. District 12 used to vote at Spence Elementary School. They now are going to vote at Mary Mother of the Church for this election. They're going to try it out, see how it works, and then hopefully that'll be a permanent change. UWL, I believe it's the rec center, or I believe it's the new rec center that they're voting in. That's still the location. At this point, it might be too late to change that, just because by statute, polling place locations have to be set a certain amount of time before the election. So yeah, that would be a concern. But again, when you go in there and they're setting up, we're going to have anybody entering washing their hands. We're going to have hand sanitizer. We're going to be sanitizing all the spray, all the locations that are being touched. So we're going to make it as safe as possible. But at the same time, we have to make sure that those students on UWL have an opportunity to vote. If they're even here, they may be back home by this point. But as of right now, it's still going to be a polling location. I haven't heard otherwise.
And then another question, can you confirm that you can't require people to wear masks when they go in to vote?
That's correct. We're going to highly encourage people to wear masks just to keep everybody safe. But if someone is not wearing a mask, we aren't going to make a scene and we're not going to force them. We're just going to get them through, vote as quick as possible and get them out the door, which is what we do with every voter. Poll workers, on the other hand, in most cases are going to be required to wear a mask, and that's going to be a safety feature for them and for the voters. But voters are not going to be required to. They'll be asked, but if they opt not to, they won't be required to put one on to vote. We're not going to disenfranchise a voter for not wearing a mask.
Okay, and then one last question, going back to your discussion on voting absentee. How do I show my picture ID when I want to vote absentee? Every time I ask for an absentee ballot, do I have to again show my picture ID? And how do I do that if I'm asking for an absentee ballot through the mail?
So Once you show your photo ID and it's on file, unless you have to re-register because your name changed or you moved, your photo ID is on file permanently. So in April, I requested an absentee ballot, which I always vote in person, but when I'm encouraging so many people to vote absentee, I also voted absentee. I provided a copy of my photo ID. It's now on file. So any future elections, if I request an absentee ballot, I won't have to show my photo ID again. If someone is requesting an absentee ballot by mail and needs to show their photo ID, they will have to get a photocopy of it and include it with their absentee application. The clerk will not mail out the absentee ballot if there's not a photo ID on file. So it'll be getting a photocopy somewhere. Maybe a neighbor or somebody has a copy print scanner where they can get you a copy, but it has to be included with your request for an absentee ballot.
Great. And then do you know if poll workers are still needed in different locations throughout the county?
They are always looking for additional poll workers, and a lot of that is because when I mentioned these bigger municipalities now have brought in second machines. The Village of Holman has brought in a third machine. So when they're processing absentees, it's a whole nother set of poll workers. It's almost like a polling place within this polling place that are processing these absentees. So they're always looking for more, and especially now when you want people, you want greeters at the door, you want people to help encourage social distancing. You know, that was nothing pre-2020 that we always talked about. You're going to want people walking around cleaning surfaces. So these are all positions that typically weren't accounted for when, say, said, I need 11 poll workers and that's how I need to run my day. Well, now we're taking into consideration all these changes, the COVID pandemic, so the cleaning of the surface, the greeters, making sure that people are social distancing. So what I want to say is for people who are interested in being a poll worker, contact your municipal clerk. In some municipalities, they have a poll worker line, a super long line of people wanting to be poll workers, and they may not need you. In that case, you can contact me, or you can go right to the city of La Crosse. I know she's always looking for additional people to staff her polls, but we like to say, try your local municipal clerk first. That way you're working within your own municipality, and you'll be familiar with not only maybe the people coming in, but like the streets, the addresses, you know, what people are talking about. And of course, you know, if they don't need you, and that's fine because we've had so many people step up, let me know, or just go right to the city of La Crosse and I can put you in contact with other municipal clerks that I know do need help at the polls for the November election.
Awesome. And one other clarification, if someone gets a new driver's license for this year, but their old ID is on file for past absentee ballots, do they need to send in a photocopy of their new license, or is it set?
No, the only time you need to put in a new copy of your photo ID is if your name changed or your address changed. So the fact that you renewed your driver's license, but the information did not change, you do not need to provide a new photo ID. Okay, and keep in mind also, sometimes when you get a driver's license and you moved, you've updated that address in the background, so the DMV has it on file. But as long as you're registered at that address that's on file, you don't need to send in the new photo ID, because again, with the photo ID, we're looking at your picture and we're looking at your, when it was issued. We're not looking at your address on that. So keep that in mind. As long as your information hasn't changed, you don't need to send in a new photo ID.
Okay, and then I guess there's kind of a follow-up here. If you have a photo ID on file, but you do move, do you just have to submit a document that validates your new address? Or do you also have to resubmit your photo ID, like your driver's license, which may not have your correct address?
Yes, so if you move, you need to re-register to vote with that new address. And then if you're requesting an absentee ballot, you need to submit a new photo ID to go with that new voter registration.
All right, and so there's a follow-up about the observers. Do the clerks have plans in place if there's somebody who is disruptive or acts intimidating, or if they are carrying a weapon or something like that?
Well, if they're carrying a weapon, I'm pretty sure they won't be allowed in the polling places. But there's a whole section on observers, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and that the chief inspector has the authority to ask them to leave. On election day, I mean, the city of La Crosse is a little bit different, but I always let the sheriff's department know, here's a list of all the polling places in the outlying areas. And they always make an attempt to do some drive-bys throughout the day to check on the polling places. Obviously, if they've got important stuff going on, they're dealing with that first, but they're aware that it's election day. They're aware that people are going to be challenging it. Knock on wood, we've been good here in La Crosse County, but there's been some horror stories in some other areas of stuff that's happened. So, you know, the person will be asked to leave. And if they refuse to leave, you know, then law enforcement will be called and ask them to come and have the person removed. But we're not going to tolerate that happening. Chief inspectors have been trained to deal with that, and they know the processes in place to ask that person to leave when they're no longer following the rules. And if they're not, you know, then we'll get the law enforcement involved. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Well, that's what I have right now. So I don't know if you had more to present. Sorry for that little blip.
I just have a couple more topics, and then we can open it up to more questions or any other topics. You know, if you want me to talk about anything other than elections, I don't know what else I've been doing, but I'm more than willing to talk about that too. So following up on the poll workers, again, contact your local municipal clerk. If they are not in need, then feel free to contact the city of La Crosse. They get information at the beginning, or contact me directly, and I will get you in touch with polling places that do indeed need your help. Some of the lessons learned from April and August, you know, I think what we learned is how to be more, in processing absentee ballots, we've learned to be more efficient. There's always been a lot of absentee voting with these bigger elections, but nothing like we've seen. April was confusing because of the law changes right before the election. Heck, we didn't know until we woke up at 7 o'clock that morning when the polls were supposed to open if we were even going to have an election. And then the decision came down to hold all the ballots and everything until a week later for the late arriving. And if people remember, it was probably 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we used to have late arriving absentee ballots where people had until it was Thursday or Friday after election for these late arriving absentee ballots to come in to be counted. And we did away with that mainly because of the confusion it caused. If there was close races, we couldn't determine winners. And for the extremely tight deadlines we have, that prevented us from declaring who a winner was because we had to wait for late arriving. So if you remember, we used to have the late arriving, it was done away with. As of now, we don't see any late arriving happening for November, but there's still a lot of time between now and then for these law changes to happen. So yeah, we became very good at learning to process these absentees ahead of time, learning to get second machines in there, learning to do everything we can ahead of time of election day, just short of counting the ballots, to make sure we're getting these results out to the people as soon as possible. We hope the public understands with this high amount of not only absentee voting, because we still expect a lot of people to show up the polls on election day, that, you know, results will take some time because it's not as simple 8 o'clock close the polls. The polls have to be closed properly. You have to make sure the poll books reconcile. There's a long, long list of what needs to be done on election day before they can report out their total. So because of the number of voting that's going on, you know, results may be later than normal, but that's typical, and that's just something that we have to deal with because of the voting, which is good because we like to have high turnouts, and if that means results are a little bit later, you know, we'll deal with that. And the only other thing I was asked to talk about was some of the grant money that came. There was the CARES Act, which sent money to every municipality. A lot of those municipal clerks were using it to not only buy second machines, but a lot of them used it to buy additional cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer. You know, for those that didn't have drop boxes, they used that money to buy drop boxes. A lot of the things they needed. There was also the money that came from the state with the routes to recovery, that actually came to counties as well. We used that money to pay for all the supplies we purchased in April. We purchased most of the supplies for the municipalities here in La Crosse County, then we got reimbursed with the routes to recovery. And again, the clerks are using that. They're using that to get new copying machines. They're using it to get labels to print that make processing absentee ballots easier. Again, buying second voting machines. Village of Holman actually bought a third voting machine. So The money is there, the clerks are using it. I've instructed them, by the time this is up, you should not be returning any money back to the state. And contact me and I'll make sure I help you spend that money, because if you get free money, it should be spent and I will help you spend it. We won't be returning any of that money back to the state. So those are the topics I had been asked to talk about. I know there's the public relations campaign where LaCrosse County spent or approved to spend, I think it was like $10,000 to work with the league and a couple other groups to do a campaign encouraging people to vote absentee. I know that's moving forward, but again, our biggest push right now is to get people to vote absentee using the My Vote website. And we still know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to show up at the polls, and we're preparing for that as well. So if there's any questions on anything I have touched or have not touched, I'm more than willing to take those now.
We have just a couple. Can you clarify your comment about if people have guns with the concealed carry law? If they have a concealed carry permit, they can have guns on them. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I know, like, if you walk into the county building, there's a sign on the door that says concealed carry is not allowed. So my understanding, again, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is if that sign is on the door of a building, you're not allowed to conceal carry within that building. I imagine a lot of the city hall, town hall, villages hall would have a similar sign on their door, being a government building that, you know, they're not allowed to. I guess I can't speak for other municipalities. I can only speak for my experience here at the admin building at the county, that sign's on the door. Therefore, even though you have a concealed carry, you're not allowed to carry in the building.
And can you comment on what is your ability, or maybe the other clerk's ability as well, to help voters who may have forgotten to get witnesses or made other errors on their ballots?
Yeah, that's a very good. So LaCrosse County clerks do everything in their power to make sure these ballots are rehabilitated so they're counted on election day. I know one clerk went as far as stalking someone on Facebook, and I use the word stalking, you know, generally here, because she knew a friend of a friend who was a friend with somebody on Facebook who was the person who submitted this absentee ballot. Because we didn't have a phone number, we didn't have an email, it would have been sending a letter in the mail, which they would have gladly done. But through knowing someone who knew someone on Facebook, they were able to send them a Facebook message and got in contact with them that way, saying you didn't have a witness signature, and they were able to get that signature, and then that ballot was counted. So the municipal clerks go above and beyond the call of duty to make sure these ballots are counted. As soon as they come in the door on a daily basis, they're already starting to process them, alphabetize them. They're checking them. Here's my stack of ones that are proper, that are good to be counted. Here's my stack of ones that are missing something. And they're looking, do I have a phone number? Do I have an email? You know, obviously phone numbers and emails are very quick ways to get in responses. If they don't have that, then yeah, they're sending a letter in the mail saying it came back, we're missing whatever. And if you don't fix that, you know, we won't be able to count that ballot. So I can't speak for other counties. I can speak for what we do here in LaCrosse County and what I encourage the municipal clerks to do. And I know they go well above and beyond to make sure these ballots are counted. In April, it was a struggle. It was a lot of new people voting absentee who typically don't and didn't know what they were doing. And there was a great many that were rejected because of that. In August, we saw that completely turn around. The number that was rejected for something missing was extremely minimal. So we know we learned that from April to August. We've done a lot of outreach. I think every time I talk to the media, I'm like, here's the 3 biggest things. Make sure you get those filled in so we can count your ballot. So yeah, we go above and beyond and do everything in our power to make sure that we're getting these ballots counted.
Robin,
Awesome.
can I interrupt you and ask a question?
Yes.
Certainly.
Jenny, as the absentee ballots come back to the clerks, are they able to run them through the electronic counter, so to speak, ahead of election day, or do they have to wait for election day?
No, they cannot be open and actually tabulated until election day. And I know when I say process them, some people think that we're actually counting them ahead of time. And when I say process them, it's the fact of we're getting them alphabetized. We're checking to make sure we have the 3 important things we need: a voter signature, a witness address. They're giving them voter numbers. Those voter numbers are being put into the poll book. So when I say processing, that's what I mean the clerks are doing. They're preparing them. They are not opened up and counted until election day at the polling place. So it's done in full view of everybody, just like it's required with law.
Okay. So do you have any sense of when results from LaCrosse County may be available on election night? I'm just, part of the concern I think out there is that people are going to get anxious about not getting the information like we did every other presidential race, and that part of the education is to help people understand it's going to take a while. It'll take a while in LaCrosse, take a lot longer perhaps in Milwaukee County or Dane County, the more populous counties. But what should we expect in terms of timing, if you have any idea?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a late night. You know, we always say, hey, if we're home by 5 a.m. and in bed, we call it a good night. But the other thing people have to remember is LaCrosse County does not modem in the results. A lot of, like, I guarantee Dane County is going to have probably 10 times as many voters as we did, and their results will be in a lot faster because they modem in their results. And by that, I mean, when they're done processing and the polls close, they simply push a button, and through the telephone, you know, they modem in those results. So the clerks are just feeding them as they're dumping in. The Crosse County still has those memory chips have to be brought securely to the county clerk's office where I read them off of the machine. Does it take more time? Yes. Is it a more secure method to say someone's not tapping into these phone lines and changing results? Yeah, so it does take some time because you have to wait till the polls are fully closed. If there's mistakes, if something needs to be rectified, it takes a little bit longer. So, you know, it may be 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And if the polls are busy all day with voters, you know, they may not get to processing all the absentees, and then that has to be done at the end at 8 o'clock. And just because the polls close at 8 o'clock doesn't mean voting has ended. Anybody who's in line at 8 o'clock still has an opportunity to vote. So if it's been a busy polling place, they could still have an hour of voters going through until they're officially closed. So, you know, if we're looking at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning before I think our final results will come in here for LaCrosse County.
Thank you.
And I think the last question that we have is, do you have any idea how much a Dropbox costs?
I do not. The county has a Dropbox. I didn't have to purchase one. I can't even fathom. It would be dependent on, you know, what time of Dropbox they got, you know, a whole lot of different variables, what they needed. So I don't have that idea.
All right, and I lied. We have one more question, which
Okay.
I think is a good one. Is there a way for a voter to know if their absentee ballot was not counted? Like if they didn't get there in time, or if somehow it was rejected? Like, can they know that after the fact?
After election day, they can track that on My Vote. Again, that's going to take up to 30 days after the election because the clerk has to go through and close out the polls and the polling books. And that means they go through and they bank every voter who cast a ballot, and then they bank every person who voted absentee. So if you look in My Vote, it'll can say you voted absentee or you voted at the polls. So they'll be able to check that way and track their ballot all the way through the entire process. But keep in mind that we have 30 days after the election to close out the polls. Big elections may take slightly longer than that, but if you give it time, that eventually will show in My Vote how you voted at the polls or whether absentee.
All right, excellent. Oh, I'm going to take you off spotlight and turn it back to Mary Nugent for closing remarks. So give me just a minute, Mary,
Okay.
and I will go ahead and get you spotlighted to conclude.
Right, am I back on?
You are.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you and Ginny for all of the important voting information. And thank you, everybody, especially our board members who've worked so hard to keep our mission alive. And thank you for attending the webinar on voting. If you have any further questions, please send them to LWVLA.gmail.com and we will get back to you. Our brand new website is also a good place to go for voter information and action alerts and volunteer opportunities. And it's also where you can get this really cool vote math. So if you're interested in that, let us know. Through your help, we can continue to inform voters and make democracy great. And a recording of this program will be on our website. So, without any other questions, please stay safe, stay involved, and we will see you in October. Thank you for joining us today.
And I want to say a special thanks to Ginny for agreeing to be our speaker today and to bring us up to date with voting issues, particularly the rise of the absentee vote. So lots to know, lots to think about. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.